Hey, so how is everyone? And how has the convention been for you so far? Right? It's been a intellectual feast. Am I okay? Here we go. So what I want you to do is please drop your comments in the chat on what you've learned so far and how you found the convention so far, and also what you've learned about your own politics and what you've learned about organizing in your own jurisdiction. Now, while you do that, and just before we introduce our final keynote of the day, I want to say a special thank you to all our speakers and contributors so far. I have to confess, it's been tough to hop in, excuse the pun, and around through the sessions because I wanted to hear everything. And there were so many nuggets of information. I just didn't want to miss any of it. But saying that, if you remember, we have the playback feature on the menu on the left-hand side where you can add the sessions to your diary and watch them back at your own leisure for the next 30 days. So just to recap a few of the excellent points we had in the beginning, very early in the morning, Jacqueline Lookman talking about how media manufactures consent and legitimacy for military occupation in Africa. I absolutely loved the points that she was making. We also had Dr. Jared Ball mention the importance of holding onto scientific socialism as the component of Pan-Africanism, something that's often, rejected by perhaps non-radical Pan-Africanists. And he was talking as well about how Black capitalism disguises itself as nationalism. And one of the statements that got me, and I hope I've heard this right, and Dr. Ball, if you're on the call, please correct me, is you said that if you practice capitalism, you practice internal colonialism. Yeah, a very interesting assertion, I felt. And there were other great talks too, so many to mention. I love Tapwa Warakandwa's discussion about labor exploitation in the mining sectors of Namibia and Azania. The proposition that human rights should be replaced by Ubuntu as the defining benchmark for our labor laws. Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Then we had the national revolutionary period of the Panther Party. We spoke about some history around Black consciousness and the Black consciousness movement in Azania, and the PAC thinking beyond capitalism and moving progressively towards a communist society, a very Marxist, Leninist position or theme there, if you like. And lastly, a session I was just in and came out of talking about institution building, and as an institution builder myself, found particularly positive and inspiring by Dr. Clyde. Yeah. So I said all that to say it's been a very edifying first day with much more to come tomorrow. And that our final keynote, or our final two actually, because we have two speakers to come, at the top of the bill have big boots to fill to take us home. So let's introduce him. And it's a change to the listed session on the schedule. Instead of Dr. Andrews, who couldn't be with us today, and instead will present on Saturday, we have Comrade Sikwindi Situla, President of State 55, a mass movement of African people at home and abroad working to create one nation and the state of Africa by mass participation. So I believe somewhere in the ether, our speaker is there in the digital ether. Please indicate to me if you are. Okay, so I think he's getting set up. And he's building anticipation. So the title of the talk is Charting a New Path to Africa's Self-Rule, Moving from Philosophy to Action, What Every African Ought to know and do. So while he gets set up, let me just try and get to a few comments in your chat. Let's keep the conversation going because I posed some very, very important questions and I hope I've got some responses to read out. Let me see. If Alola, all that happened while you were gone, where was I? Where were you? Yeah, please tell me. You've missed the feast. If you're only just joining us now, we've had some unbelievable conversations. Volt M, colonialism was the imposition of capitalism on the people of the world. Forceful imposition. Yeah, and I mean that's a consistent theme that we've faced throughout the day, right? But you know, I want to push it back into questions around socialism as the antithesis of capitalism. I think we're all there, right? I think we all believing that, and scientific socialism, particularly, being a way forward for African people. But does it have a roadmap? Do we have a political map or political plan to implement that? Or do our people, as we discussed in our last session, actually know how this works in reality? Yeah. And have we done a good job of selling this or connecting it to the struggles of everyday people? Yeah. So perhaps those are deeper questions to how socialism or scientific socialism is going to overthrow capitalism. Yeah. Not that it should, but how is it going to happen? Some people, did I freeze? I'm sorry if I froze. I hope you can see me now. Okay, so I think our speaker is here. So please continue to populate the chat, continue the conversation, because now I think we are all set with Sikwindi. Are you there, sir? Please shout out the ether. Let me know that you can hear me well. No? Still getting set up? Okay. All right, so let me move to a quick video. And then we'll be back. Turn the guitar up, Mike, please. Guitar, Mike. Freedom, 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 freedom.
Okay.
Freedom.
Excellent. Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, Sikwindi, how are you?
I am fine. How about you?
I'm great. Now I gave you the big build up, and I think the technical glitch meant that I was left hanging a little bit. So we're all eagerly waiting and anticipating your presentation, and I'm going to waste no time in handing over the mic and the stage to you to take us home.
Oh, okay. I am fine. How about you?
I'm great. Now I gave you the big build up, and I think the technical glitch meant that I was left hanging a little bit. So So are you with us, sir? Please let me know you can hear me.
Maybe. I trust I can go on now.
Yes, you're live. We can hear you. We can see
Oh, okay.
you.
So yes. Yeah, just give me a one bit. I can hear my voice play back again. I trust I can go on now. Yes, live. So yes. Just give me a one bit. I have a problem because I think there's an echo and the video takes so time to it's taking time. There's so I don't know when to start. I have a problem because I think there's an echo and the video takes so time to second time. There's so I don't know when to start. I guess I just have to read this and I just have to continue then from here. So I greet you all from the heart of Africa, Zambia. And today at this historic conference, we question the scope and quality of our freedom and set a new narration Then give me. Trust I can start now. Okay. Where was it? Where?
What's on your mind? Yeah.
Okay.
Then you come alive.
Oh, okay. I don't know whether I can go on now. Then everyone can see and hear you. Okay, thank you. I think this is okay now. I greet you all from the heart of Africa, Zambia. Today, at this historic conference, we question the scope and quality of our freedom and set a new narration that it is not yet Uhuru. We interrogate the impure motives of the imperialist agenda and expose the shrewdness of the imperialists in the control of everything of theirs, including our lives and resources. As we peel off the layers of historic lies and systemic oppression, therefore, we come to the full realization that we have never ever been free at all. And so we are confronted with the rude reality that the freedom we have long considered and celebrated all this long is nothing but a fraud. It is a huge fallacy. We are simply offered dupes of from unscrupulous fellows.
Can you hear me?
Originated into a conjuncture of lies into our lives, and such
can you hear me, brother?
perpetuate their doctrine of subjugation engendered by our self-hate in the.
Sikwindi, can you hear me? We're having trouble seeing you. We're having trouble seeing you. Can you move your camera down a bit so we can see your face?
Reflection, control our lives as human beings for their selfish motives. It therefore goes without saying that the African history, even as recounted by the colonialists themselves, is one masked by years of pain and anguish. Here at this conference, nonetheless, we are presented with the opportunity to reassess our historic challenges and neo-colonialism in particular, and to rethink the solutions we have framed against such ills. But to decolonize Africa, you need to put. Oh goodness.
Yes.
So can we start all over again? Maybe that will help.
No. Continue from where you're from. Fantastic. We just wanted to see your face as you speak. Thank you very much.
Okay. Can you see me now?
Yes, very good.
Can you see me? I can't even know where I ended because there's echo, there's sounds playing back. I can't even see where I ended. Okay, it's here. I have to stop hearing that voice playback. Can you see me? So,
Oh, Sikwindi,
hello,
hi there. Shall I?
hello.
Yeah. Shall I
Can
tell you?
you see me?
I can. Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can. Yes.
Okay. So now, I think allow me to start all over again because the echoes that
Yeah.
are playing back have really missed me out.
But let me tell you how to get rid of the playback. So you have
Okay.
two channels. You have two channels open. Yeah.
Okay.
And you need to mute. You need to mute the main stage on hopping.
Ah, okay. So
Yeah.
I
So
need to go back here and mute the.
if you go to
Yes.
hopping, you go to the stage on hopping, and then you mute yourself. That will stop the playback.
Okay, so now I think allow me to start.
Okay. So now speak. So now if you just broadcast through StreamYard, you'll be fine. Yeah, so unmute yourself in StreamYard.
Is that right? Okay. So no feedback, right? Excellent. Ah, beautiful. So now we can start from there. Okay. Um, so sorry for that, technical, knockout, if you like, but we can start afresh. So I greet you all from the heart of Africa, Zambia. Today, at this historic conference, we question the scope and quality of our freedom and set a new narration that it is not yet Uhuru. We interrogate the impure motives of imperialism and expose the shrewdness of the imperialist in the control of everything that's ours, including our lives and resources. As we peel off layers of historic lies and systemic oppression, therefore, we come to the full realization that we have never ever been free after all. And so we are confronted with a rude reality that the freedom we have long considered and celebrated is nothing but a fraud. It is a fallacy. We are simply offered dupes of freedom from unscrupulous fellows. This culminated long ago. This culminated into a conjuncture of lies unto ourselves, such that we too have perpetuated their own doctrine of subjugation and engendered by our self-hate in the rejection of everything African. All this was well supplanted by those who long elected to control us as human beings for their selfish motives. It therefore goes without saying that the African history, even as recounted by the colonialists themselves, is one that is masked by layers of years of pain and anguish. At this conference, nonetheless, we are presented by the opportunity to reassess our historic challenges and neo-colonialism in particular, and to rethink the solutions we have framed against that. But to decolonize Africa, you need to put into context the imperialist agenda on public display. We need to remind ourselves of the full design and scope of this system of oppression. And so what the world came to experience in the Berlin Colonial Conference of 1884 was the acceleration and not the beginning. Our imperialist problem runs as far back as 1568 and relates to the theft of the Hebrew canon of the imperialist by the imperialist in the part of what the Church of England reconstructed in 1568 and handed over to King James of England in 1602 as the best text of the King James Version or King James Bible as the official Bible in 1611. This goes on until the beginning of slavery in the United States in 1619 and went back into the commencement of the formal slave trade across Africa in the 17th century AD. Then climax in the imperialist declaration to partition and share Africa around the conference, the Berlin Conference, table in 1884. It comes all the way until the most complex system was crafted into an inescapable net to trap every nation in it, the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. Just like religion, the system of economic servitude and cultural colonialism is the most perverse plan of colonial control because it is very hard for one to untangle themselves from it. Of course, where they politically surrendered and withdrew from our colonized country, they did not only retreat into the perfection of their plan, into perfecting their plan, and thus the introduction of a more painful form of colonialism, which is neo-colonialism, which is what we call neo-colonialism today. So actualized in 1947, the Bretton Woods system provided the base or the motherboard of neo-colonialism we have continued to suffer for decades. This is the system and the linchpin of colonialism as we know it. It is the most stealth plan that colonialists and capitalists have ever mastered and supplied to the world for perpetual control. Only a few of our forefathers in Africa could fathom this plan and find the right impulse or a wherewithal to free themselves from this problem. At their withdrawal from political, occupation of Africa, they had a simultaneous introduction of an economic doctrine of suppression, the one that I referred to earlier as even more harder to escape. And therefore, they introduced what you want to call a virus, or a virus in the blood system of the economics, if you want to express expressible terms. So this system of economic regulations was finally adopted in 1947 when the Second World War had just ended, and was therefore their long-term warfare through which they weaponize economics through fixed exchange rates and etc. Now, these rates were permitted to fluctuate on foreign exchange markets only through a narrow margin of plus and minus 1, where central banks were allowed to stabilize exchange rates by interest rates, foreign exchange market interventions of capital movements. So that is the solution that they crafted, for their interest. And so by the Bretton Woods Agreement, only central banks outside the US had the responsibility of defending exchange rates, while the US Federal Reserve remained passive in the entire equation. But by military might, the US had a well-orchestrated dictation to every nation, to every nation with a central bank. So through this force, they boosted the dollar by the convention of gold credits, which was the credit for every central bank. They basically moved all the gold from all the central banks, bought it at a 35%, $35 per ounce, and introduced in the place of the dollar, they introduced a dollar. And of course, this is how the dollar became the most sought after currency in the world. So that made the dollar a replacement in terms of value for gold in those credit value systems of the central banks. But by that single action, the US dollar became tantamount to holding gold. And this is how the dollar became a capital trade node of the world. This marked the beginning of our global economic servitude system of nations, or against nations. All these non-calendar marks were the weapons against the African people and ultimately the plunder of African resources. Since then, we have come a full cycle to where Dr. Kwame Nkrumah pointed us as a starting point to seek first the political freedom such that everything else would flow from it. We have also come a full cycle from where Marcus Garvey pointed us to seek a union of people and to look homeward and rally most of the masses into their own economics and defining the road to the promised land. We have come a full cycle in what Dr. Kenneth Kaunda and Julius Kambarage Nyerere defined as our political ideologies around our culture as Africans. We must also acknowledge the successes and ongoing efforts of others, such as the African Union in this regard, where they adopted Swahili as the official language in Africa. You can add to that the construction of the Africa Free Trade Area, wherein Africans can syndicate their markets and begin to trade even more effectively among themselves. But we can go even further. And therefore, the question is, where do we go from here? How do we make our efforts today as a concept of wider intercourse and something of greater appeal across nations and all other known elements of human divides? In my book, The Deacon's Diary, which is a book soon to be published, I share the biblical clue of Africa's predicaments. Are we not the dry bones scattered in the valley, as Ezekiel referred to in Ezekiel 37, verse 1 to 14? So that's a question we must answer, because that, for me, provided a clue of what was going on there as recorded in the Bible. So Africa cannot continue to be seen as a continent or people thrown on their head. I know that this is a book-length title, but we also know only a power of Africa would be good enough to resolve the problems of Africa or the problems that Africa faces in the world. As this we all know, yet we negate it. That is the only way we can face the international order and be accountable to the change we seek. Only when and only then can we reach our age of change, of liberation, of promise, and of hope. But to do this, we need to catch the imagination of our people to bolster mass participation into a great African agglomeration. We need social, economic, and political change. To realize that, we must mobilize. Although we cannot offer a set of promises to ourselves, we can at least offer ourselves a plan of action to supply anybody with a platform that assures success. That is what State 55 has been doing. We are about to supply every African with the impetus to demand for the state of Africa and to move further into the master of our economics and the repair of our social fabrics. This may seem only as a leadership blame, to those people who stand at a distance. Neither should we fall off the significance of Africa's own interest, for a mere facade, concealed in shy statements. There must be some real movement for Africans to demand their rightful place on the global stage. We, the African people, should not mince our words to state our interests or the interests of Africa on the global stage, because Africa's interests do matter to us and is a matter of inescapable balance. Their complexity notwithstanding, we must oppose oppression and subversion. We must reverse widening poverty and social disparities. To do this, there is only one path out, and that path is the United States of Africa. We must be bold enough to work towards that and to stop talking about it as though it is a far-fetched dream, but to realize that through our participation as a people, we can actually entrust our leaders to come to that conclusion, the amalgamation of nations to form the United States of Africa. We must also distill Pan-Africanism from academic and elitist reason and place it in our day-to-day processes. We cannot continue to be a grand nation beaten on our face all the time and on our nose all the time. But of course, we cannot repeat the mistake of those who went before us by debunking neo-colonialist leaders to the front of such a glorious agenda for Africa, where we acquire a special importance not of ourselves, but of those that rule the world out of the poor location, large, and still growing population, above all our resources. Now we've got a large population, we've got good resources, our position is right. Why should we always think it is not possible when we are endowed with all that matters for the world? But Africa cannot continue to offer herself to the theaters of controls or a controlled revolution in the world, such as her participation, as we have observed before, in the 2 world wars. Instead, she must craft her own interests and chart her own way forward as a progressive force to self-actualization, far away from mongering, keeping her interests to pure motives of her unique interests in her unbridled influence. But Africa has very little success in this area if we continue to assign blame on others rather than become the part of the blame ourselves. You see, nothing should stop us from seeking greatness, for the means are not granted by free and cozy ways, but taken by thorough thought and strategic maneuvers on the world stage. Clearly, we have reached the mad point where we must master military might and independent economic solutions, or we risk being overrun by anybody and everybody. We know all this too well, that solitary designs have solitary effects. They are nothing but solitary foolishness. To erase colonial imprints, we need to balkanize everything, ranging from large economic endeavors to astute and apologetic military might, and we also lose, and we will also lose everything to anybody and everybody, even the little that remains of the colonial granted states in their revulsion nature, if we don't do anything about, the state of affairs. It is just time for us to modernize and democratize Pan-Africanism. Now, that's a responsibility we have. From a long time ago, we had Pan-Africanism, and at some point we think that it is an agenda for the old people. Sometimes we begin to think that an agenda that rests, lecture theaters and that. But the bottom line is Pan-Africanism must be for us as Africans. And how do we do that? We, the Pan-Africans, must be ready to modernize Pan-Africanism and to argue for democracy in Pan-Africanism. Now, when I say argue for democracy in Pan-Africanism, it's because Pan-Africanism, like many other ideologies that are opposed to the West, has been labeled as, in short, arguing that you must keep a dictatorship in place. That's far from it. So it is our responsibility to make Pan-Africanism attractive across social and economic rights and across creed and culture, if you like. It is time to make Pan-Africanism a sweet stay of business. And this path we chart today is one such important path in the entire equation of decolonization. The world we grapple with today was constructed by mafia law. To live in it, we must band together. We must make Pan-Africanism work. We must, and we should insist on that one. There is need for us to make Pan-Africanism work. Even as we march forward, we must be clear that ours is a means to peace, self-actualization, and due regard others and to others. We seek a rare rule of greatness in which we offer friendship and love for all the peoples of the world. But we do not want to do this from a position of weakness, rather than that we must consider our strength as endowed, within us by God, our Creator. And we are meek people who have got good heart, who are good-hearted, warm-hearted, and people of, a placid disposition. And we should be able to, with that nature and that character, we should be able to aid our own process of making our ideology, the African ideology, work, to the extent that all our peoples begin to benefit from it. But to our brothers and sisters off the shores of Africa, you remind us of the need to tell you that though the problem is in the US, the problem, comes or is generated from a weak Africa, the state of Africa, most of the countries in Africa. If you had a strong state of Africa, I think you will be protected, because I think you'll be assigned a greater regard from anybody that lives with you and around you. So the crack may be up the wall, but the problem is in the foundation, the footing. So, and that footing is right here, and that's Africa. So together we must fix Africa, and all goodness will flow bountifully from there. China's rise to economic and military, study is a post-war project whose fortunes began around 1949, as the US saw China, the growth of China, or the rebuilding of China, or the aid of China, as a great benefit, because they were building the market to stand against, Japan. So since then, unfortunately, the Chinese have become omnipresent in Africa. Everywhere you go, they're there. So rather than frown upon the obvious, we must engineer for ourselves the solutions that work for us, the solutions that will reconfigure Africa on the global stage. It is our job as the people, and therefore we the people must do that. With a population racing towards 1.5 billion people, Africa has no reason to lie down on her face, I repeat. We have no reason to lie down on our face. We have every reason to march on the world stage with particular strength and a well-stated knack of humanity as our strength. And a matter we must indulge with, and with much ease and honor. Because we know that Africans have been taught to self-hate all their lives, we must constrain and reverse the system of indoctrination through a peculiar devilish education and religious systems that sometimes blatantly suggest that the Africans are, a nobody, and all Africans are a nobody. I think we Africans must feed on a doctrine of being good people, God's creation. We have been taught to memorize and to regurgitate so that we can only become relevant to a colonialist system. And that is the appalling state of our education standards and design, the scope of our education design. If you consider hundreds of years of being publicly traded as commodities, of being treated as beasts and machines on plantations, of being used as defense weapons to fight foreign wars, the dehumanization of the African people is painful. It painfully runs deep and wide. Africans have been driven like cargo in cargo vessels, taken to foreign land beyond their shores, stripped of human dignity and one's own will, then given a new name, a religion, and miseducated, miscultured, if you like, and given a language and socialized differently. What remains of an African is simply a lost mind and a pent persona far away from whom they ought to be. Everything considered, though, we must not run into the war when we can avert it. The war I'm talking about is a building, is some barrier, that is erect, not the war of fighting. This is why we need a new perspective of our old challenges in order to draw new solutions to our old problems. So even when this is so, we must not keep a painful culture of submission. Instead, we must be ready to disagree with those that seek to control us eternally and to keep close only those that oppose us with objectivity. Certainly, a people in crisis should go about finding their own way and rejections of the chains of control in a way of moving forward to a better choice. So we know what better choice is: banding together. This is why we need to find a strong belief system that suggests the obvious to us, the truth to us. And that is, we are greater beings that are only good people. But I dare say it incisively, we are wonderful people, and this is surely known to be true. Our value is priceless. Our value as a people is priceless. We cannot believe that we are wonderful. We must believe that we are wonderful people. We are wonderful human beings who are also, who also own something. So, and that notion should be unchallenged in our minds, because the value that we possess as a people, as Africans, and the natural endowment that we have is beyond, question. So going forward, we must go beyond a cliche, and that cliche suggests that we're poor people all the time. Every African must tell one another that they are beautiful, and that, the world fortunes, are in their place. They own them. They are with them. So the practice of Pan-Africanism must have clear goals and it must culminate into a state and breed a culture of Pan-Africanism, as it were, as a way of life for the African people. So philosophizing Pan-Africanism without a clear goal is only as bad as a worthless indulgence with information and publicizing information of Pan-Africanism to our enemy. We cannot do it. If we cannot do it, we should not talk about it. That is why we must move from words to action. Galvanize the nation of Africa at home and abroad into a new space of participating in the affairs of this supposed new nation. Clearly, Africa is a nation without a state, and we've known this all our lives, that Africa needs to band together and create one state if we are to survive as a people in the near future. And so the people must proclaim it, declare it, and so on and so forth. We do not have the luxury of time, of course, and we cannot, therefore, to mass philosophy, where we're basically just philosophizing without action. We need to re-educate our masses into a new belief system that allows us to see ourselves as the only solution and say to ourselves, the buck stops here. The solution we seek today must be well informed of the real scope of the work we must undertake to operationalize Pan-Africanism and to continue our struggle for freedom and self-rule. But to me, Pan-Africanism has only two prime goals: the unification of the peoples of Africa and the establishment and inauguration of the unitary federal state of Africa as the vehicle through which to plant and engender a culture of Pan-Africanism. The question, however, is how do we do this? Firstly, we must open dialogue with existing political parties in Africa in order to re-interest those that already know about this and interest those anew and interest those who may have not seen this as a worthy idea, so that we can bring them to our ideals and to this grand idea and value system, so much that we can begin seeing the possibilities rather than experience the shutdowns of the simple sentence, it is not possible, you can't do it. So secondly, we must create a political body of political parties wherein progressive political forces will subscribe to the ideals of Pan-Africanism, buttressed on the factors of our state of emergence insofar as the creation of the Union State goes. So lastly, every Pan-Africanist must know this very well, that power comes through political organization and participation in the many electoral processes of our narrow-minded countries, as they may seem. But that is where power resides. So we need to go back to our countries, in the manner in which they are operating, and begin contesting the political space and begin sharing a good thought process that brings Pan-Africanism in the face of, or to the front of political, debate, so that people can begin appreciating, what Pan-Africanism is and what it can do to them, as a historic, solution to their problems. So the people must go back. So the African people must go back to the drawing board and create relevant political organizations in all our countries as a way of bringing Pan-Africanism, the fall of political system, political debates in our countries. But there are other places where there are political parties that would be interested to know more and work the thread of Pan-Africanism. So those must be approached. There are many across Africa, and they must be shown the reason why it will work if they, join the club of, those that think African. But also, the AU must introduce a platform for political parties across, across Africa, so that there's a club for political parties, not only as a club, but as an auxiliary body of the AU, to the extent that they will not need to go and sensitize political parties, in another space rather than bring them in the same space. After all, governments are formed from political parties. We cannot keep to arguments that are only detrimental to our own existence. For all we know, as much of the Muzungu and what he has taught us is that he has constructed us or reconstructed us to stay relevant to his system. And it's up to us to move, from there. This is why the solution we seek today can only work when we are realistic of the agenda we pursue. We need to understand the general body politic of the world and appreciate that our input in it must be well defined with realistic goals. Everything we seek, therefore, is, that everything we seek right now in this design, of systems is not an accident. These things flow from people who sat and came up with a plan on how they should control the world. And therefore, if our plan is to say we are going to upset that plan, it's not realistic. Our plan should be we will do what we need to do with our space to deal with our issues and build our own state at home. And I think that the scope is large enough, and it only rests with those that wield the power of national leadership to also come to the full realization that if they don't do that, they'll soon be running around begging all the time and endlessly. We must continue to shift our tactics and to keep our focus, to retain our strategies, and in coordinating our efforts in a stealthy fashion, minimizing disagreements, amplifying our commonality, and observing unity in diversity. Together, we can find a host of solutions where there was only a maze of problems. We must offer a new version of Pan-Africanism, an idea with ideals that make Pan-Africanism even more relevant today. An idea which ought to be a new culture and a social political fabric of society so that we can experience the new nation we seek and want. Even as we continue to relish our national identities so less than our goal of a unitary state of Africa, our duty, we must come up to the full realization that we have a duty. And our duty, therefore, today as a people, is to make this agenda gain traction so that the glorious goal we seek can be realized. For this reason, we must continue with the nudges of the youth and the children, or even other people, this whole cluster, which is our colleagues, so that they can pay attention to the need for popular participation in resolving the issue of building the state of Africa brick by brick, Kalastan by Kalastan, and this we must do. By recognizing every avowed intent of our forefathers, which they lived and died, as our own ideals, we must continue to ingratiate ourselves with the spirit of our forefathers. I believe in the idea of democracy, and this is the last statement. I believe in the idea of democracy. I believe in the idea of democracy as a civilized tool and means of engagement for the construction and the management of a nation. Thus far I go, more than I should perhaps observe the idea of democracy as a foreign policy tool for the West, to push their own agenda of foreign policy on African soils. So everything that we need to do revolves around a plan to build from where our forefathers left and pick a vehicle, and that vehicle can only be politics, in order to affect our economics and to affect our social, establishment or social, strata, so much that we are able to carry our people along in the idea of fighting for our freedoms in the decolonized Africa. We need to decolonize Africa as a matter of, urgency. I thank you.
And we thank you, Sikwindi, for a fantastic oration and stirring us with some really, really interesting ideas. I just wondered if you had a few moments to take one or two questions from the chat. Are you still here, by the way?
Not a problem.
Please.
I must apologize. It's not been an easy presentation. There's so much, that you have to work around, in this space. Yeah,
absolutely. And we appreciate your perseverance and thank you for, for plowing through. And we're grateful that you did. But let's have one or two questions from the chat. It's been a really interesting dialogue happening as you were speaking. And I think I'm going to go first of all to Ifalola, who very early on as you were speaking asked the question, I would like someone to explain why adopting Swahili as the continent's official working language is a good thing. And why is it problematic? So both sides, she's asking for, or he or she is asking for the arguments for adopting Swahili as the official language.
Okay, there we are. We are back. I'm sure, hopefully there's no... Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you said there were questions, yes?
Yes. Did you hear the question I had about adopting Swahili?
Yes.
Yeah, if you could answer that one for our comrade Ifalola.
Come again? I didn't hear that.
I said if you could answer that one firstly for our comrade Ifalola.
You are talking about the Kiswahili as a language, an official language, right?
Correct. The arguments for and against.
So what is the question?
The question is, can you give us the arguments for adopting Swahili and explain why it should be the continent's official language? And could you...
Okay. Yeah, of course. I think that, we all know that the way we are ruled over by others is that they give us a language that makes it difficult for us to communicate among ourselves with a sense of belonging and a sense of ownership. Now, Africa is the only place where you have so many languages that are very good, but you can't necessarily pick on one of them to be the official language. Now, Swahili is the closest there is to an African as a language. It's easy to teach. It's been tried in Tanzania, in Kenya, and many others. It's working, and it works. So I can, of course, have the debate of French, English, and many other, languages is not the case here. But my issue is, can we pick one single African language and use it as the official language away from Swahili, which is basically a mix-up of, bit of Bantu and, Arabic?
Right.
That would be a difficult, journey to embark on. But it's easier now that we can use Swahili and use it and have a sense of belonging, in the usage of that, language.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you answering that question. Just before we move on to our next speaker, one more question, if you will.
Not a problem.
And there's so many. I mean, you touched on, you have your interpretation and your definition of Pan-Africanism. You talked about...
I can't even get you. You may have to repeat yourself and maybe try to speak a little louder. This system is very difficult because of the delayed voices. there are so many. Yeah, the delayed voices is really disturbing. Even when I was reading my speech, it's a bit difficult. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just make this one very brief. You made the when you were talking about the Bretton Woods institutions,
Yes.
you called them the motherboard of colonialism, which I thought was
Yes. Yes.
a brilliant expression. And I do know
Not a
that
problem.
I do know that we've been, obviously, if you're Pan-Africanist, you advocate delinking from these institutions, right? But in the midst of when a
Please
lot,
repeat your question and maybe try to go slowly because of the delayed voices. It's really
yeah. So I was just saying, how do you propose that our countries delink from the Bretton Woods institutions? You know, many of them are still borrowing from the IMF and the World Bank. Many of them are still heavily indebted and in cycles of debt repayments to these institutions. How are we supposed to get out of that debt trap with the Bretton Woods institutions?
okay. So your question is on the debt trap.
Correct.
Yeah, and what I tried to do in my presentation is to show you that there are things that we cannot fight and and win. There, and I'm trying very hard to show you that even as we do our activities of Pan-Africanism, we must have realistic goals because they motivate the people to come along knowing it's doable and it's going to happen. So now, how do we avoid the Bretton Woods institution? It's as close to an impossibility as anything one can it's not easy, in short, because the whole system that we are operating with in the world is theirs. When you have a central bank in Nigeria, the central banks, the operations of your central bank are legally addressed, or they are plugged into the World Bank and the IMF system. That's why I tried to show you that instead of you having your gold for your credit value as a bank, they came and bought that gold from you because they are superpowers and they gave you a price for it. And in its place, they gave you the dollar as a credit value, material, paper. Why? Because they run the world. So what we should be looking at is it possible to make our own state as Africa so that we can be strong, our voice can be strong on the global stage, so that we can play our role in the economics of the world from the point of view of strength rather than weakness. I think that's what we should be looking at. It's possible to participate in this mischievous plan. It's possible for us to participate in that from a position of strength rather than participate in it from a position of weakness. And that's my argument.
I see. Well, look, I could talk to you all day. I mean, we've had our conversations in the past, and what I will say is I appreciate you giving us such stirring insight, and I'm really sorry that we've got to let you go, but we've got to move on to our next speaker. And please hang around, maybe look in the chat so you can answer some questions that have been pitched to you by our people listening. Thank you, Sikwindi. Thank you. So up next, taking us home, we're on the home stretch now, is someone who I think will be familiar to especially our comrades in the US. We are going to be hearing an address from Fred Hampton Jr. Now, Fred Hampton is an American political activist based in Chicago, the famous Chicago, where the Black Panther Party in the revolutionary period of the 60s had their programs for African people. And he is the president and chairman of the Prisoners of Conscious Committee and the Black Panthers Cubs. He has an event coming up called the Annual Street Party, commemorating the birthday of Chairman Fred Hampton Sr., his father. And the party will be from 4 to 9 and will be there to have 8 performances from musical artists and other cultural celebrations. Now, the title of Fred's talk is The Black Panther Party African Anti-Terrorism Bill, the international call to cease the terrorism that African people have been subjected to. And I'm hoping, without technical difficulties, that in the digital ether, Fred Hampton Jr. is with us. And if he is, I would love you all to give a warm virtual welcome to our final keynote of the evening. Or unless we're going to have a short intermission. I'm not sure which one. Fred Hampton Jr., are you with us? No? Okay. Okay. So as Fred Hampton Jr. gets set up, I'm reliably informed that he's just connecting his devices and ensuring that he's tested and doesn't have any technical hitches. Please let us know what you thought of Sikwindi's talk. Let us know in the chat how are you feeling about some of the content and some of the pronouncements that he made, particularly around his definition of Pan-Africanism, which included unity of state and people. Didn't really include the scientific socialism element, interestingly, that we heard before. Didn't really touch on sort of the economic model or socialism as the mechanism to defeat capitalist exploitation. So really interesting themes there. He talked about currency markets as well, and escaping the currency fluctuations and how sort of the role of the international monetary system still keeps us subjugated and keeps our currency devalued. And obviously that has impact for trade, has impact for people's spending power, has impact on living standards. So how can we get out of that cycle as well? And what does self-actualization mean in policy terms? You know, these are questions that we want to pose to you based on his talk. And if you can let us know your thoughts and ideas in the chat before Fred Hampton comes, I'm sure Sikwindi's still around to engage with you and give his thoughts as well. So after this short intermission, we'll be back with Fred, but please let us know your thoughts of those questions in the chat.
Oh, la la la. Oh, la 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 la. oh yeah, oh la la, oh oh la. Here's a song that was written for us by Hugh Masekela. He calls it Soweto Blues. The children got a letter from their master. It said no more Xhosa, Sotho, no more Zulu. Refusing to comply, they sent an answer. That's when the policeman came to the rescue. Children were flying, bullets dying, the mothers screaming and crying. The fathers were working in the city. The evening news brought out all the publicity. Just a little atrocity deep in the city. Soweto blues, Soweto blues, Soweto blues, Soweto blues. Benny kupina matota, ametubula abantwana. Benny kupina abantwana, abetikitela esisi okoto. Benny kupina. There was a full moon on the golden city. Knocking at the door was the man without pity, accusing everyone of conspiracy, tightening the curfew, charging people with walking. Yes, the border is where he was waiting for the children, frightened and running. And one got away, but all the others are in the jail without any publicity. Just a little atrocity deep in the city. Soweto blues, Soweto blues, Soweto blues, Soweto blues. Benny kupina matota, ametubuna abantwana. Benny kupina abantwana, abetikitela esisi okoto. Benny kupina. Soweto blues, Soweto blues, Soweto blues. I will let mama. Soweto blues. They are killing all the children without any publicity. Oh, they are finishing the nation. Why second glance. But everybody knows they are behind it. Without any publicity. They are finishing the nation. Won't somebody help out there? Yeah, let the mama somewhere to blues. Yeah, let the mama somewhere to blues. Oh, yeah. West wind, blow it gentle over the souls of Africa. My sons, proud and noble, here within my heart they lay. West wind, with your wisdom, gather all the young for me. Dark cloud hanging over, nest thy bosom, strong and free. Make us free from exploitation and strife, 'cause nothing is more precious in life. West wind, with your splendor, take my people by the hand. Spread your glory, sunshine, unify Mother Africa, unify my precious land, unify us, don't divide us, unify us, don't divide us. We don't need it now, Lord. Let us not fight over trivials. Let us learn how to love ourselves first, because unification is the thing now. I said a unification. Unify us, don't divide us. Unify us, don't divide us. Do you hear me, my friends? Do you hear me, my brothers? Do you hear me, my sisters? Do you hear me, mama? Do you hear me, daddy? Do you hear me, everybody? Unify us. Oh, don't divide us. Don't divide us. Unify us. We're tired of poverty. We're tired of dying. We don't want to die. We don't want to be poor. We're tired. Unify us. Unify us. Don't divide us. Don't divide us. Unify us. Unify us. Don't divide us. Don't divide us. Unify us. Unify us. Don't divide us. Don't divide us. Unify us. Don't divide us. Unify us. Don't divide us.
I want to show you the perfect tool for making
Elmira, are you out there? For women. For Negro women, each one has a different color. Jaune, noir, brune, correct? Brune. Je parle français un peu, un petit peu. So I hope you understand this. It is a picture of 4 different women, Negro women. My skin is black and my arms are long. My hair is like wool and my back is strong. Strong enough to take all the pain that's been inflicted again and again and again and again. What do they call me? My name is Aunt Sarah. Mon nom est Tante Sarah. My skin is yellow and my hair is long and straight and long, long, long. Between 2 worlds, I do belong, I do belong. My father was rich and white. He forced my mother late one night. What do they call me? My name is Saffronia. Mon nom est Saffronia. Bien, guitarrista, yeah. My skin is tan, tan. And my hair's all right. It's fine. My hips invite your daddy. And my mouth is like wine. Whose little girl am I? Why, yours if you got some money to buy. I meet you in Cannes later. What do they call me? They call me sweet thing. They call me sweet thing. They call me sweet thing. But I say, yeah. My skin is brown, brown, and my manner is tough. I'll kill the first mother I see. My life has been too rough. I'm awfully bitter these days, 'cause my parents were slaves.
Hey everyone, I hope you've been enjoying this convention. So some unfortunate news, we were trying to buy as much time as possible for the chairman to show up. Unfortunately, some type of technical difficulties or something is happening, so we will have to no longer have that presentation. But we do want to leave it off on a positive note. So we are going to play one of the famous Maurice Bishop's speeches. Before we do, I do just want to talk about what we have coming up tomorrow. So we do have Baba Mukasa Dada, who will be giving the keynote from Black Power to Pan-Africanism. If you know anything about Baba Mukasa, you know that he has been through all of it. Like, he's literally, this man that literally organized with Dr. King. This is someone who has gone through the entire movement and stayed involved, stayed militant, stayed completely ready to devote his life to the people, and he still is that way today. So this is someone we're very happy and proud to have tomorrow morning. Then we'll also have a number of other sessions and breakout sessions, so you can check your schedule as far as what will be happening tomorrow morning. And I believe we'll have things more down packed. The issue was, you know, we tried to have some people come in and they might not have been able to practice or whatnot, but a lot of the people next coming up tomorrow, I know for a fact, have tested their equipment and everything. So I'm believing that we'll have a lot more of the easier time and transition. But I do want to leave you all with this speech of Maurice Bishop, especially on the theme of neo-colonialism and imperialism. As we all know, the Honorable Maurice Bishop was assassinated by the United States, like so many of our other revolutionary leaders. And here he brings out the what's the word, hypocrisy of the West. Whenever the West wants to look at African-led movements or look at revolutionary movements and try to judge it by capitalist Western white supremacist standards, he breaks down very nicely how the West basically has found themselves guilty whenever they try to apply their own standards to our revolutions. It's a really good speech to understand neocolonialism and imperialism, and also obviously honor this man's great legacy. So we're going to leave it off right there. Please do continue on in the chat, listen to the speech, comment, give your thoughts, and we definitely look forward to more engaging in more conversation and connecting with you further. So with that, I'm going to let that speech come right on.
Revolution was all about and why the U.S. government opposed it. This is Maurice Bishop's first and last speech on American soil in 1983 at Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn, New York.
Thank you very much for that very warm welcome, sisters and brothers, comrades all. May I start off, sisters and brothers, by bringing to you warm fraternal greetings from the free people of revolutionary Grenada. And may I also, right at this very beginning, say how very, very pleasant it is to be back in New York among you, to be in this great hall where there are so many hundreds of our sisters and brothers That is going to bring a great deal of pleasure to our free people, and I will certainly report your warmth, your enthusiasm, and your revolutionary support for our process when I return. Of course, we are here among friends. But looking around, there are two people here who are right now representing their country at the United Nations, people who are involved in liberation struggles, people who are struggling for their national liberation, for justice, for freedom for their countries, freedom for their peoples. It is very important right at the beginning, sisters and brothers, that we acknowledge the presence of Dr. Terzi, the representative to the United Nations of the People's Liberation Organization, the PLO. Dr. Terzi can be assured, as always, that the people of Palestine and their sole authentic representatives, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, will always have the firm support of the fraternal people of the world. The South African racists who have spent so much time inventing all sorts of ingenious ways of oppressing the people of South Africa, the black majority, who have spent so much time in ensuring that those people are not able to reclaim their true patrimony. They are now discovering that in common with all of the national liberation movements around the world that are forced to move to the highest stage of the struggle, that the African National Congress is also willing to make that step. In saluting the Deputy Permanent Representative of the ANC to the United Nations, let us ask him to bring back to his people, to bring back to his organization, to bring back to Oliver Tambo, to bring back to Nelson Mandela, whose spirit is here with us. To bring back to all of his people and to his revolutionary organization the love, the respect, the concern, the admiration, and the fraternal feelings of all of us to the people of South Africa. Brother David Ngaba. The last time I had the opportunity, sisters and brothers, comrades, of being in New York and addressing our Grenadian nationals, other people from the Caribbean and Latin America, and of course, the people of the United States in New York, was 4 years ago, as our ambassador to the United Nations has said. Since those 4 years have passed, a lot has happened in our country. A lot has happened in the world. And one of the reasons at this time that we have come to the United States, in fact, is to be able to share our experiences of the last 4 years. with the people of the United States. We were anxious to do this because, of course, there has been a major campaign over the last several weeks and months, starting from last year, November, with some remarks by the Vice President in Miami. Continuing with more remarks from the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, the Admiral of the Fleet, and then the President himself. And in all of these remarks and allegations, different allegations were made against our country. And therefore, we were particularly happy, comrades, to have had the opportunity of an invitation from Trans-Africa, the organization based in Washington that has been doing a lot of lobbying for Africa and the Caribbean. We were invited to come to address their 6th annual dinner last night. And that was a very successful event. And we want to publicly thank Trans-Africa once again for making this visit possible. The Congressional Black Caucus, too, was involved as co-sponsors of this visit, and we also want to place our appreciation on the record. Of course, we set ourselves other objectives once the visit was definitely confirmed. And these objectives included the very important objective of trying to see what we could do to deepen and strengthen the people-to-people relations which have always existed between our two countries, Grenada and the United States. At the level of the people, there has never been any problem. At the level of the people, we have always had excellent relations with the people of the United States. In fact, as you know, in some years, more American tourists come to our country than the entire population of the country. And on top of that, there is a medical school in Grenada. And at this medical school, over 700 young Americans are earning their right to become doctors, are getting a career in free Grenada. So from our point of view, clearly bad relations do not make sense. From our point of view, the need to deepen ties, the need to ensure that even more American visitors come to our country every year is a critical and burning need. And another objective was to try yet again to establish some form of official contact and official dialogue with the government of the United States. We, of course, cannot decide which government is going to be in power in the United States at any given moment in time. That is a matter for the people of the United States. And whoever happens to be in power at a particular time, we believe it is extremely important for us to maintain normal relations so that we are able to conduct proper dialogue in a civilized fashion. There is a need for some kind of mechanism to be established. And that is why we have been struggling so hard over all of these years to try to get some of the basic norms reestablished. Let us exchange ambassadors, we have said. They have rejected that. So we have no ambassador accredited to Washington because they refuse to accept the credentials of the ambassador we have suggested. When they replaced their ambassador after the electoral victory of President Reagan in 1980, and the new ambassador came out in 1981, he was not, in fact, accredited to Grenada. So we have to talk, presumably, using loudspeakers. And even when we write letters, like I did, for example, in 1981 on 2 occasions to President Reagan, in March and again in August. First letter, short letter, making the simple, obvious point. Look, you are a new president. We had hoped that as a new president, you would have taken a new look at the situation, that you would have been anxious to start off on as good relations as you can with all countries around the world. We had hoped that you, therefore, would have wanted relations normalized. And we went on in that letter to make the point that what we are saying is the true bottom line is dialogue. It is talks. Therefore, let us get these talks going. We are proposing no agenda with any preconditions. Let us look at all questions. Let us put them all on the table. Let us see what you perceive as problems. We will tell you what we perceive as problems. Let us see if in the course of those discussions, we can narrow down differences. So at least the new beginning that is made will be begun on a basis of mutual understanding with less distrust and less suspicion. No reply to that letter. So the fact is, sisters and brothers, we have had this long, long history of trying to see in what ways relations could be normalized, of working very hard at trying to get some form of dialogue going, and we have had very little success in this regard. But I really want to say tonight that we do believe it is important for us to continue that struggle. And therefore, notwithstanding the difficulties in the way, we deem it very advisable for us to continue to press for a full normalization of relations. But of course, as we press for normalization, we are also going to continue to build our revolution. We are also going to continue to consolidate our process. In the face of all of the difficulties, in the face of all of the economic destabilization, the political, diplomatic, and military threats and pressure, we don't intend to roll over and play like an ostrich. We are going to stand on our feet and keep going forward. And as you know, sisters and brothers, in these times, it is becoming more and more difficult for developing third world countries to go forward. Because unfortunately, our economies remain by and large dependent on and tied to the capitalist world economies. And therefore, when the capitalist world goes through their cyclical crises, one after the other, it has an immediate effect on us. As we say at home, when the capitalist world catches a cold, we catch pneumonia. And the crisis in the capitalist world has been deep. In all of the developed, industrialized countries, there is greater and greater unemployment. And as this unemployment goes deeper and deeper into the society, the people who feel it the most are the poor and working people. The massive cutbacks. The massive cuts in social welfare. The cuts are not coming in the arms race. The cuts are not coming out of the arms budget. I understand the talk is to spend $3 trillion over 5 years. The mind boggles. That is the kind of money that is supposed to be consumed in arms. But while that kind of money is being consumed in arms, hospitals are closing down. Jobs are being, more and more retrenchment is taking place. pensions are being reduced, medic aid is being reduced. In other words, the arms is swallowing up the money. The people are not benefiting. But the effect this has had on us in turn, countries of the developing world, has been to also create a crisis in the developing world. In the developing world as a whole, it is now estimated that our debts exceed $650 billion. That is how much money we owe collectively. Just servicing of debts alone is causing massive problems for the countries of the third world. Last year, $131 billion was spent on the countries of the third world in just servicing their debt, just paying the interest, not 1 cent back on the capital. And that took $131 billion. But on top of that, we are also discovering that it is becoming more and more difficult to engage in trade with the countries of the Western industrialized world. But even as they make it more difficult for us to trade with them, the whole question of aid, which at one time used to be regarded as a kind of duty that the developed capitalist world, the developed industrialized world had, if duty it was, that duty has virtually disappeared. Because the reality is that aid has also decreased quite dramatically for third world countries. But not satisfied with all of that, what they have now done after cutting off aid, cutting off trade, cutting off investment, making it virtually impossible to get money through the international financial institutions, now they are forcing more and more third world countries to go directly to the international capital market, to the big commercial banks to get loans. But the reality is that by forcing us more and more to have to go to the international capital market, the debt trap is intensified even more. And while all of this is going on, sisters and brothers, there are so many people in the world who are unemployed, so many people in the world who are going hungry, to bed hungry every single night. So many millions in the third world who are illiterate and whose governments either do not care or feel they cannot do anything to solve that problem. Unemployment, hunger, malnutrition, disease, illiteracy. These are the crimes and the sins that are visited upon the poor developing countries of the third world, while the industrialized countries continue to exploit our resources and to keep the profits. But yet, sisters and brothers, in the face of all of that, the Grenada Revolution has nonetheless continued to go forward and to make progress. At a time when even the big, powerful, industrialized nations were growing backwards last year, we grew forward by 5.5%. The revolution in Grenada, starting from a base from Gary of 49% unemployment, coming from that base, when we did a census last year, April 1982, the unemployment rate had dropped from 49% to down to 14.2%. The last year of Gary, 1978, the capital investment program was $8 million. The first year of the revolution, that figure was more than doubled. It went to $16 million. The second year of the revolution, it was doubled again. It went to $39.9 million. And by this time, the experts were saying that is impossible. You don't have the resources, you don't have the management, you don't have enough tractors, you don't have enough trucks, you don't have enough engineers. You can't possibly do it. You all were only lucky in 1979 when you double Gary own. And you're only lucky in 1980 again when you double your own. And then when we went in 1981 and we double it again, they say, well, we don't know if it's luck, but something is wrong. You all can't do that again. And then last year in 1982, it went up to over 100 million. And then we gave them the secret. We told them that in a revolution, things operate differently in the normal situation. We have been able to make these accomplishments because in Grenada, consistent with our 3 pillars of the revolution, where the first pillar of the revolution is our people, who are always at the center and heart and focus of all of our activities, we are able to mobilize and organize the people to cut out waste, to cut out corruption, to stamp on inefficiency, to move to planning, to look out for production, to check on productivity, to make sure that state enterprises are not set up to be subsidized, but that state enterprises too must become viable, must make a profit, and therefore the state sector will then have the surplus to bring the benefits. We have been able to pull our people into the whole economic process. And our people have gladly been pulled into the economic process because our people see the benefits which the revolution has brought to them. They understand that when 37 cents out of every dollar is spent on health and education, that means something. In this country, the figure is probably nearer to 10 cents on every dollar. Because today in Grenada, the money that the people of Grenada used to have to spend, for example, when they went to a doctor or a dentist, that money they no longer have to spend because they now have free health care throughout the system. Our people understand the value and the benefit of free secondary education because they know now that once their children are able to pass the common entrance exam and get into secondary school, they no longer have to worry about finding those fees, which, as you know, for agricultural workers, for example, were very often impossible. But not just free secondary education, but in effect, free university education. Moving from a situation before the revolution, where in the last year of Gary, 1978, just 3 people went abroad on university scholarships. And they happened to be Gary's daughter and one of his other minister's daughter. Moving from that situation, in the first 6 months of the revolution, 109 students were able to go abroad on free university scholarships. Our people are more and more getting to understand what we mean when we say that education to us is liberation. That education is a strategic concern of this government. That is why this year, 1982, is the year we have named the year of political and academic education, because we understand the importance of bringing education to our people. following the establishment of the Center for Popular Education program in early 1980. Within 1 year of the work of the CPE program, the illiteracy figure in Grenada was reduced to 2% of the entire population. The people understand that in all areas of their basic needs, real attempts are being made to solve these problems. 2.5 million gallons more of water, pipe-borne water, are flowing into the homes of our Grenadians at this time. Before the revolution, under 30% of all homes had potable water. The people understand what it means when electrification is brought to their village. The people understand what it means when they know that by the middle of next year, we would have doubled the electricity output and capacity in our country, and therefore more people would have the possibility of electricity. Our people, therefore, sisters and brothers, have a greater and deeper understanding of what the revolution means and what it has brought to them. They certainly understand very, very clearly that when some people attack us on the ground of human rights, when some people attack us on the ground of constituting a threat to the national security of other countries, our people understand that is foolishness. They know the real reason has to do with the fact of the revolution and the benefits that the revolution are bringing to the people of our country. The real reason for all of this hostility is because some perceive that what is happening in Grenada can lay a new socio-economic and political path of development. They give all kinds of reasons and excuses, some of them credible, some utter rubbish. There's an interesting one that we saw very recently in a secret report of the State Department. I want to tell you about that one, so you can reflect on that one. That secret report made this point, that Grenada is different to Cuba and Nicaragua, and the Grenada Revolution is in one sense even worse, I'm using their language, than the Cuban and Nicaraguan revolutions, because the people of Grenada and the leadership of Grenada speaks English and therefore can communicate directly to the people of the United States. I can see from your applause, sisters and brothers, that you agree with the report. But I want to tell you what that same report also said, and said that also made us very dangerous. And that is that the people of Grenada and the leadership of Grenada are predominantly black. They said that 95% of our population is black, and they had a correct statistic. And if we have 95% of predominantly African origin in our country, then we can have a dangerous appeal to 30 million black people in the United States. Now, that aspect of the report clearly is one of the most sensible ones. But, sisters and brothers, how do we evaluate other sides of the report? Like when they say that Grenada violates human rights. When they say to us, how come you have detainees? What about the press? What about elections? When they say to us, where are your elections? They don't turn around at the same time and say to their friends in South Africa, where are your elections? When they say to us that elections must be held, and if you don't have elections, then you can't expect support. And unless you have elections, then we can't give you the normal treatment. We say, Salvador Allende of Chile. Salvador Allende of Chile was elected in September 1970 by the people of Chile. Allende did not take power through a revolution. Allende did not form a militia. Allende did not grab any land or property. Allende had no political detainees. Allende did not crush the press. He did not close down the parliament. He did not suspend the constitution. He played by every rule they wrote, but they killed him still.